Hi, and welcome to episode 21 of Leadership Untitled with Kareen Turner. That's me. I help leaders build influence. Before we dive into today's topic, which you've seen, how to delegate effectively, I want to share some exciting news in the month of May, which is the month that we're in right now, which is incredibly unbelievable. And also, it's May the 4th. So, May the 4th be with you. I couldn't let that go by without saying it. But in the month of May, I will be launching my services for the very first time. And part of what I do is help women in leadership, whether that's corporate, whether you're a founder, owner, entrepreneur. I help you as a female, as a woman leader. I help you conquer and eliminate overwhelm so that you can achieve greater abundance, also greater success without those feelings of heaviness, without the burnout. So I'm excited to launch those services in the month of May. I will have different pricing options. I've also got a really fun special gift to unlock bonuses to some of the first people who purchase. So if you want to stay connected, and I know that you do, please message me wherever you are watching or listening to this podcast. You can also email me, Kareen, Kareen, at leadershipuntitled.com. Again, that's Kareen, Kareen, at leadershipuntitled.com. And I will add your name to the list so that you can get regular updates and that you don't miss the day of the launch. It is going to be a fun time. And I am so incredibly passionate about this work. I cannot wait to serve more of you who have reached out to me, who have messaged me, who've thanked me for this podcast. And I thank you for connecting with me. And any way that I can help, I'm here to help. And so these services that I'm launching my business officially is an expression of my passion to be of greater service. So again, message me or email me, Kareen at leadershipuntitled.com, so that you can stay connected and receive all of the updates related to this launch. Today's topic, it actually brings together two of my favorite things to talk about, which is leadership and operations management. We're going to talk about the long-standing frustrating need to talk about delegation, how to delegate effectively. You know, you need to do it. You likely don't want to do it and want to do it at the same time, but it is one of those, I guess, tasks as a leader that just remains out there in a very faraway land. But let me tell you, and for those of you who have successfully navigated delegating, I know that you are incredibly relieved when you finally hand off a task that you don't need to do, when you finally let go. I know for those of you who have successfully navigated delegating, you will also tell us that it's messy and that it takes a couple of iterations and that it may take removing a task from one person that you delegated to give it to someone else. And that's okay. It's part of the process. But I promise you, I promise you, it is worth the effort to take that weight off of you from a task that you don't need to do and allow someone else to thrive in doing it. Because when I talk about overwhelm and helping to conquer overwhelm, one of the first places that I begin with clients is looking at to-do lists. And your to-do list is an expression. Your to-do list is a representation of everything that's going on in your mind. The other expression, which I was very guilty of, is the number of tabs that you have open in your on your computer on your screen. So I'm going to ask you to check right now. Do a check. How many tabs do you have open? Because I'm on my podcasting software, I only actually have 2 tabs, but very regularly this still happens. I have usually 20-ish tabs open. Where I have gotten much better is regularly closing them. So I would go weeks and weeks with the same tabs open until I would go to those tabs and realize that the site had logged me off, or I had 3 or 4 of the same tab open because it was too much to go back and see what was already open, what I already had open, and try to find it. So now I regularly take stock. So it might be a couple of days before I go in and see, why do I have this tab open? Why am I cluttering my mind with all of this? And I shut them down. The next part is to-do lists. I want you to take a look on Wednesday, May the 4th at noon, shortly after noon Eastern time. How many tasks do you have on your to-do list? Most of us routinely have, most of us as high performers routinely have 10, maybe 20. Some people who I've seen, colleagues, I maybe me, maybe not, have a running to-do list. And so I would create a list, a page in my journal where I would just have a running to-do list, which is a strategy. The problem is that sometimes I would look at that list as my to-do list instead of taking items from it, copying it to a new page. So many of us have way too much on our list. Experts have said you can probably accomplish 3, and that's generally what a lot of journals promote as well, is 3 main tasks. Because what we forget as we are creating our to-do list is, as leaders, our day is partially ours and partially not ours. We, as leaders, are here to serve. We're here to serve our clients. We're here to serve our team members. And there's no schedule for that. So at any time, your day can take a shift where you have to address an issue, where you are called into a meeting that you didn't expect, where a client, a customer, whatever, whoever would like to speak with you, and you have to, whether good or bad, address a situation. And those situations often take time. So when you look at your day, you're just, this whole day is mine. I maybe have 1 or 2 meetings, but you forget to think about the ways in which your day may be interrupted, may go sideways. Again, no matter what that interruption is, the fact is that your day as a leader is partially not yours. It's not. And so people are knocking on your door, especially if you've created an environment where people feel safe coming to speak to you, where you have that quote and unquote open door policy. And I've talked about in previous episodes about setting boundaries around your time. And that's okay as well, to let your team know between this time and this time, I'm not available. But we know that emergencies arise. So, as you think about your to-do list, this is a little bit of an aside from delegating, but as you look at your to-do list, really think about not just what's on your calendar, but think about the ways in which your day is generally goes, how many people come to talk to you. You have the history and you have the knowledge of how often that happens. So just keep that at the front of your mind as you're creating your to-do list. So you likely have way more than you could possibly do during the day. And I want to venture that not only are there too many items on your list, that maybe 2 to 3 of them are also too deep. And by too deep, I mean, today I'm going to solve world hunger. Today I'm going to figure out how to create world peace. That's what I mean by too deep. I was looking at my to-do list as I was preparing the notes for today, and on a couple of days I had finished my course. for school. For those of you who don't know, I'm in doctoral studies in leadership. I'm getting a doctorate in business administration. And literally, that's all I had was finish my course. And when I looked back at that time, it was early on in the course, and I had probably 2 or 3 really big papers that needed to be written. But what I wrote in my book was finish the course. And I know me, so I want you to be honest with yourself that in my mind, with everything else as a homeschool mom, working on building my business, supporting current clients, just being there for family and friends, I still believe that in that day, I could carve out enough time to actually buckle down and focus just hard enough and finish my courses, finish papers, do the research, write them, get them done. So that's what I mean. Too many and also too deep, not specific enough. And while logically we may understand that our to-do list is impossible, the fact is that we wrote the list and there's somewhere in the back of our mind that potentially, perhaps, if the stars align, if everything goes well, I might be able to finish this 50 item list. And the problem with that is that, again, while logically we know it's impossible to complete this list, we've set ourselves up subconsciously to kind of expect it. And at the end of the day, when we haven't completed all 20, 10 items, and 10 doesn't seem like a lot, but for many of us, again, I'm going to refer to that and too deep. I was pointing at my notes like you can see them, but that too many and too deep comes back. And we take on the burden, whether we realize it or not. We take on the burden of having not completed the task that we set out to complete. It is what causes us to wake up, or rather bolt up in the middle of the night at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock. Where am my 3 a.m. risers? Raise your hand. Is what causes us to wake up in the middle of the night, or that feeling of I'm missing something and never feeling like we're completely at ease. Now, delegating may not be able to solve the feeling completely at ease, but it will absolutely help reduce it. And it will significantly help you reduce your feelings of overwhelm. I want you to feel joy and abundance and not that crushing weight of having not completed the work that you've done. The crushing weight of feeling like you've let your team down, you've let your colleagues down, that you're not up to par for the job that you have. Again, imposter syndrome sliding in because you weren't able to complete a 20-point, a 10-point to do list. Even 5 for many of us is way too much for the type of work that we are doing as leaders and the support that we are providing to our team in order to move things forward. So that's why I'm passionate about delegating, because it removes so much of the feelings of disappointment that we have in ourselves. On the practical side of delegating is that there are likely tasks on your list that you're not doing that are making you the bottleneck, and you know you're the bottleneck, and that's a terrible feeling. It's the feeling that other people can't do their work because I'm not doing my work. So what can happen from those situations is that you begin to recognize the tasks on your list that are required for other people to complete their work, and so you begin to prioritize those tasks. And they're important. But for so many people, when I work with them as clients or when I'm auditing my own to-do list, they are tasks that need to be done, but don't need to be done by you. And so you're prioritizing tasks that just keep things going, which is important. We want our operations to continue to work. But what are they doing to move the needle forward? What time are you spending on the tasks that are ensuring that the organization runs smoothly. But in return, what are you letting off your list? Like taking time to create strategic plans for growth, whether that's decreasing costs, whether that's increasing revenues, thinking about launching new initiatives. So our to-do list actually gets crowded with the probably before I started, but that square of the important, urgent, not important. Sometimes we spend a lot of time in our urgent but not necessarily important quadrant, because those are the tasks that are just always there. And we never get to the important, move business forward. And as leaders, that is part of our responsibility. It is to find ways to move our organization, our team, our organization forward to help them continue, because we never want to stagnate. When you're stagnating, you are dying, right? So, as leaders, it's key that we look at our to-do list with a critical eye. So, there are a few ways that I help clients navigate creating effective lists, but no matter where I go with the to-do list, the first stop is delegating. It is doing that audit. So I recently saw a reel on Instagram that shared a tip about delegating and says one of the tips to help you become more comfortable with delegating is if you are the only one who can do the task. And that was it, period. And I laughed because I said most of the people who I work with and myself as well will tell you for so many tasks that I am absolutely the only person who can do it. And that we know is not true. So it was just a little too vague. We have to push ourselves. Here are some of the excuses that I get. The number one excuse is that when I'm the only person who can do it. I don't want to burden my team members. I hear this over and over. Delegating and assigning means that I am adding a burden to a team member. I'm adding more work to an already stretched team member. And I know that for working in corporate, you don't have control over staffing. I know that if you are a founder or a business owner, that you are mindful of your labor expenses. But here's the thing. If you are feeling that adding a task will stretch your team too much, then I really want you to consider one of the tips that I'm going to share momentarily. So I don't have the time to explain it. That's another one that's very common in terms of excuses not to delegate. There's no one qualified to do it, and it will land back on my desk anyway. What's the point of delegating when they're not going to do it the exact way that I want it? They're going to make 1,000 mistakes, and it's going to end back on my desk anyway, and I will have wasted time and I will be behind. So I'm not even going to start because I already know how it's going to finish. There are more, but those are my top 5 that I hear and that I have also said pretty consistently before I learned the power, thankfully, years ago, of delegating. So I'm going to call BS on everything on that list. Hopefully you weren't shaking your head yes, like she understands me. Nope, calling BS on that list. I want you to say it with me. I am a master delegator. I am a master delegator. That's what I want you to practice saying. I am a master delegator. Change your mindset, start changing your subconscious. So let's talk about what you really do need to keep. And this list is not exhaustive again, but I want you to think about what really does need to be on your list. Because as you look at your list, I want you to have a reference so that it can help you as you create the list of keep and delegate. It can help frame that work. What do you really need to keep? Tasks that have been assigned to you specifically where you have access to confidential data. So that's number one. Anything related to security, confidential data, anything where the person who you're delegating to would need your password or your username to get in, that's a no. You need to keep that task. If you believe that there's room for someone else to take the task, then create that plan of action, that proposal, and be sure to get the appropriate access needed. But those are the tasks that you need to keep. Leadership duties. One of the areas where I worked previously in a past life years ago, some of the leaders were delegating evaluations. And here's it's funny because I don't necessarily enjoy doing evaluations when you've got hundreds of them to do. But here's the thing, that is your task as a leader. Can you certainly have input, and you should, from your supervisors? And depending on how your organizational structure is, you may be able to have a manager complete an evaluation. But for most organizations, it stops at manager. There you go. It stops at manager, and usually supervisors help provide, or leads, coordinators help to provide information for you to create. But it's you who's writing it, and it's you as a leader who needs to also have the conversation with the team member. So those are key items where you are not going to assign, especially coaching and counseling. So your leadership functions, your leadership duties. Another task that you really need to keep are key responsibilities that are unique to your role. So what is it that you do, that you were hired for, that is in your job description, that is unique to you? And even as I list those 3 areas that you need to consider, again, not an exhaustive list, but 3 very key areas that you need to consider, there are likely aspects or portions of those tasks that you can delegate. So the first thing is, we're not going to get granular, don't worry. But when I work with clients, I absolutely get granular. Here's a very general keep side of the page. Here's the delegate side of the page. But now let's go back to the keep side, and let's really break down what these tasks are and see what our parts is there data gathering that can be done? Are there meetings that someone else can set up? Really breaking down your key to see what portions of it, what aspects of it can you delegate. So, as you are looking at your list, as you are thinking about what is your keep, what is your delegation, your delegate list, there you go, your delegation, your delegate list. I want you to also consider what's really holding you back. And I'm going to go back to that list of what of the top excuses that I've heard, that I've even given myself, is I don't have time to explain it. And when I hear that reason, that excuse, I know that it is the lack of operational foundation, the lack of operational processes that's allowing you to feel that way. So we often associate tasks as ones that only we can do, mostly because the steps to do those tasks, the nuances of those tasks, reside here in our minds. For those of you who are listening, pointing to my head, reside in our minds only. They're not written anywhere. They're not documented anywhere. They're not even on a sticky note on your computer screen or in your device. They're not anywhere. And so because of that, the idea of trying to take something that we know like the back of our hand, putting that into words, and then teaching it to someone seems overwhelming, especially if we have the belief that it's going to end up back on our desk anyway. The great thing is that you don't have to, it's not as onerous anymore. Delegation does take time, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it doesn't. It absolutely takes some time to do. But when you think about the time that you have saved in spending a little bit of time to pass off a task that you don't need to do, that is adding stress to your life, that is making you the bottleneck in a system, or if you're not the bottleneck because you're on top of those minor tasks of the day, then you're not really finding ways to grow your organization, grow your company, to be able to have time to think strategically. This time is worth it and it's key. And I want to say, as a leader, if you are not seriously considering how to delegate, and if you are taking things, if you're also taking things from your team member because you feel that they're too stretched, that is you shirking your duties. I said what I said. It's you shirking your duties. You have a responsibility as a leader to not just be in the moment every day, but to also be forward thinking. And that's why delegating and removing tasks off of your list and becoming so clear about what gets on your list and what remains off of your list, what you need to delegate, because the work still needs to get done. That's why it's so key. It is part of your leadership responsibilities, and it is a skill that you need to develop and develop it quickly. So I want you to do a time study. This is your homework for this week. I don't think I've given homework for a while. This is your homework for this week. I want you to keep your to-do list just the way it is. But I want you to identify the tasks that you wouldn't need to do and that you don't need to do, and how long those tasks are taking you. And then I want you to think about, once you have done that time study, and I actually want you to do it, once you have done that time study, you'll have an idea of the amount of time that you would have to spend thinking about initiatives that can, again, either decrease costs, increase revenue, allow you to think about new initiatives, launch new initiatives. I want you to compare that time. I promise you, you are spending more time on tasks that you don't need to do. And when you look at it in the span of a week through this time study, you'll realize just how much time you're spending in areas that are not the best use of your time, talent, and expertise. I promise you that. Once you've done that time study, then you'll know definitely which tasks are ready to be handed off. And thankfully, there are so many more tools available now to help the process of transferring what's in your brain to someone else. If you're like me, you're a writer. I love to write. I have notebooks everywhere. So I will take time to write out, but I have also really found apps, software beneficial for this project, for this project of delegating. So these are not sponsored in any way. I've shared how much I love Otter.ai, which is a voice recording text, which is as close to writing as I can get. You can tell I love to talk. So talking through the task, but even more effectively, software like Loom that will allow you to screen record as you're actually doing the task, if it's something that's on the computer, while you narrate your steps. So that way, your team member has a visual and an auditory opportunity to see and hear what it is that you're assigning to them. Once you have found a way to get the knowledge from your mind onto paper or somewhere else, into a video, into a voice note, however it is that you're going to transfer that information, then I want you to spend time truly thinking about who is the best person to assign each of these tasks to. Then I want you to assign them, train, and then provide active feedback. I've heard the phrase before, hope and hire, or hire and hope, where you hire someone, throw them in and hope that they do well, and then are extremely shocked when they're floundering because you gave them no guidance. The same applies for delegating. I don't want you to delegate and hope and walk away and then get frustrated when things fall apart. Someone is learning. It's new to them. It took you time to learn it at one point before it became second nature to you. So I'm asking you to have grace and provide active feedback. Again, delegating is not going to, it will take time. So it might be that person shadowing you in addition to what you have given them, the information you've given them, that they might need to shadow you for a couple of times while you're doing the task. You may need to shadow them to be sure that they're not missing anything. So you have to accept that there's going to be times where you have to give active feedback, that you have to be checking in to be sure that the key steps aren't missed. And then I want you to do something radical. I want you to accept that once they have the key components down, that they will likely change things and adapt the process to what works for them. Now, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. They have the key elements, but they might change the way it's done. They might change the process, and that's okay. So many of us can't let go because it's not done exactly the way I want it to be done. It's not written in the way that I would write it. You will never move your business forward, your team forward, your organization forward if you don't grasp the fact that other people have different ways of working, but it doesn't make it wrong. And you'll never successfully navigate delegating if you believe that it has to be done in the exact same way that you did it. As long as the key elements are done, I want you to accept that people will gain their own shorthand for doing the task. So when you are giving active feedback, it's about the requirements of the task, but not necessarily about how they have found their own way of working through it. I want to encourage you to let that go. That's ego, and I want you to let it go. That people will do things differently than you, but it doesn't make it wrong. And I don't want you to, when there is a mistake made, when it is a little bit messy, to pull it back. Give active feedback. At most, you may decide that perhaps this team member isn't the right one for this task and work to find another team member. But I don't want you to pull that task back on your list. I don't want you to do it. If you are incredibly savvy, you may even train a second person so that when that one person goes on vacation, calls in sick, or life just happens, there's someone else who's trained to do the work and it doesn't automatically fall back to your list because you weren't thinking ahead. When when you have the time to strategize in that way, these are the things that you think about, that you begin to plan. Because I know so many of you, for those tasks that only you can do, you're doing them when you're sick. You are finding ways to do them when you're on vacation because they need to get done and you're the only person who can do them. Who wants to live that way? No. No, ma'am, we're not going to do it. So I want you today, this week, to begin focusing on that time study. And I want you to begin thinking about who you can assign. And I want you to think about how are you going to get that information, the most effective way to get the information from your head onto or into someone else. Okay. Now, for those of you who work in corporate, or if you own your own business, you might be saying, I don't have the budget, or it's not in my purview to hire more people if my team is truly already stretched. That's the beauty of a time study, which is why I actually want you to do it. I want you to create a proposal based on the time spent. So if you are in corporate, I know that's a little different. I want you to create that time study and think about what is the return on investment for the organization to bring in someone based on how much time you need them for. What is the return on investment for you freeing up that time as a leader? What can they expect from you? What more can they expect? And create a proposal. Also consider sharing. I have shared an administrative assistant in the past with another department. Certainly not the easiest, and it does require some navigation, But I will tell you that part-time assistance cleared up so much off of my list and off of my mind. I will to this day tell you how incredible that arrangement was and how great my assistants in that role were and how they helped me. Yes, it was messy at times, but not being able to pass off as much as I did was just such a relief and allowed me to be able to move on to and move the department forward as required by my time, talent, skill, and expertise in that role. So consider that proposal and that return on investment. If you're an owner and you're thinking, well, I don't have the budget, well, you don't have to hire someone full time. How much time do you really need? Is there anyone on your team currently that could take on some of those tasks? Not everyone needs to take all of those tasks. Or do you bring someone in for 1 or 2 hours a day? There are so many options for virtual assistant help that allow you to get very granular in terms of how much time you need a person support for, a staff support for. So consider that you're not tied to the traditional 20 hours or 40 hours. You can get contracted assistance and look into it. Oftentimes, we hold ourselves back because we think it'll be too expensive and we haven't done the research. Do your research. It's going to be messy, but following these steps for delegating will help you delegate effectively and will help release your mind, release that burden where you're not bolting up at 3 o'clock in the morning, wondering who did you let down? What did you forget? Relieving some of that overwhelm and that uneasiness that you already feel, that so many of us feel. And on the plus side, giving you an opportunity to strategize, your opportunity to scale, your opportunity to think of incredible ways to grow. To bolster us, I would like to ask that you share your delegating success stories in the comments. If you're watching live on Facebook or YouTube or LinkedIn, share in the comments your success stories for delegating. Email your success stories into me at Karen@leadershipuntitled.com so that I can share them with your permission, of course, that we can share how delegating, even though messy, was absolutely worth the effort in the long run. Well, you know what I'm going to ask you to do next. It is to share. I know that this episode on how to effectively delegate to reduce your overwhelm, eliminate those 3 a.m. wake up calls, the mind that you can't turn off. I know that this has helped you. So please share it with your colleagues, share it with your friend. I'm working to build a community of influential leaders. I will see you next week for episode 22. Bye, everyone.